would say this, right? Like we're talking about timing of change and all that type of stuff. Everybody, I think, is probably familiar with Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, right? And so I did not make any changes here until a year and a half or 2 years. I'll tell you why. Because let's say in his 5 levels of leadership, you got position, you got permission. Position is when people follow you because they have to. Permission is when they follow you because they want to. Production is when they follow you because of what you've done for the organization. And then reproduction or people development, people follow you because of what you've done for them. So I go from 17 years in Amherst at a church to my first year at Akron. Guess what level of leadership I was on? 1. You follow me? I was a positional leader. So I did my job description really well. I tried to preach really well on Sunday. If I wanted to go to level 2, I had to build relationships. I drank a lot of coffee, and I met with people. I listened to them. I did all that stuff so that by the time it came year and a half or 2, they finally said, okay, why don't you go ahead and lead, And so I think that's really critical to when you introduce change. Sometimes people go into a church and all of a sudden they got great ideals and they start firing them out and people are going, we don't even know who you are. Right? So why would we follow you? So I think that's a really critical thing. Now I'm going to get into these in just a minute. The other thing is be thinking about holy discontent. What Sutherland calls holy discontent. In other words, why do we need to change these particular things? Right? Holy discontent. You ready? We don't have any young families coming here. We wanted young families. Right? We can't keep doing church the way that. Nobody came to Jesus last year. Right? So it's this holy discontent that can lead to change. So resistance to change. When you look at these things, you may have experienced them already along the way someplace. So I'll just go ahead and I'm going to try to use a clicker. Oh, did you do that, Dan? You did. These guys cover for me all the time. The clicker's new. And sometimes I don't have it turned on, and sometimes I don't know where it is. But Dan kind of covers my back. So these are things, you can go ahead and write these in. Expect opposition to change. Expect anger. Expect apathy. I got angry. There's anger twice. Oh, that's so true. And then you got expect ridicule, right? It used to drive me nuts, because do you know that people talk about you behind your back? I was like, why would you do that, Well, guess what? You're a leader, so they talk about you behind your back, Another one is expect criticism. I don't know if there's enough blank for these. And at some point with some people, there's going to be a fight, because they're fighting for their turf and the way they've always done it and all those type of things, And so try to handle those things in private. If it gets to that level, maybe a private conversation. I can remember one of the power brokers that, it seemed like just everything they were against, And so I called him in my office because you could be one hard conversation away from a breakthrough. Right? And so I called him in my office and I said, I'm just going to be straight with you. I said, it just seems like every change we had, you've been resistant to. And I said, the other thing that happened in a society meeting the other day, anybody? Do you have those anymore? Okay, yeah, that was the last one I had. But anyway, whoops, sorry. My name is Rick, and I am a Free Methodist. I'm in big trouble. But anyway, I said in a society meeting last week, I said I invited some people to come that were first-time guests because I said they'd get a good feel for our church. I said publicly, you called out one of our young leaders in the meeting. And I said, I told that family to set in, and they got to see something that's not totally us. I said, so this is what I would say. I said, you can continue to critique our young leaders, and you know what's going to happen? One day they'll stop listening. I said, or you can come along beside them and breathe wind into their sails and see and share some of what you know from your experience. But let them just fan it into flame, and let them shine, And to their credit, they got up and said, we'll think about it. That was 12 years ago. They both are on our accounting team, right? And I walked in the other day, and she looked at me, she said, Pastor Rick, she said, that was like one of the best messages I ever heard you preach. And we have a friendship, and they did their part, in the change, and it's huge. Not all of them ended that way. But I'm saying that somehow point, you have to kind of address what the conflict is and walk them through it. So how do you keep on track? Pray. Maybe that goes back to your point. Like if you know you're doing what God has wanted you to do, keep working. Keep on working. Keep encouraging. Keep on leading. Can I tell you what one of the hardest things was about Medina is I was looking for a building and I couldn't find a building. I mean, after I already launched this thing, that this is what we're going to do. And I'm having launch team meetings and people are saying, did you find a building? No, we didn't find a building. I felt like Abraham. And where are you going? You're leaving? Yeah, where are you going to? I don't know, just going. God said go, I'm just going. And just keeping vision alive during that period. And keeping hope alive during that period becomes really, really critical. It's leading through that hard time. Keep on watching. Have your pulse on what's going on in the church. So did I get these truths right, Darren? I don't know if you're looking at that page, but the truth under the first one, I think, is don't be afraid, right? Did I get it? Don't be afraid. You can go ahead and write that in. And the second thing is that God is with you. Second truth under that second column, remember that, if this is his will, then that old phrase, if he brings you to it, he's going to bring you through it. He's going to walk through that particular thing with you. If you flip over the page, can you flip it down? Be in the change. One more. Oh, here we go. When you're leading a change, it may be an external agent that you have to use. Because there is an appearance of impartiality with them. The next thing, there's an objective view of the situation. And then outsider status allows for difficult decisions, right? So I'll go back to it. I shared it once before. But there's a book called McIntosh's, it's One Size Doesn't Fit All. And in there he shares typologies of churches. And so he was an external agent. Do you understand? Never came to our church, never was in the room. They read the book. And when we went down, there's a section on here, and I can make a copy if you want, where he talks about growth obstacles in small churches, right? And there's an explanation in the book. Listen to this, right? Growth obstacles in small churches. Small church image, ineffective evangelism, inadequate programming, downward momentum, inward fellowship. Does that make sense? And it may be 3 out of 5 of those. But I did the same thing. I just said, what do you think about us? Ooh, right? So McIntosh was right. And then it gives growth strategies. Renewed sense of purpose. So that's why we talk about this first. Where are we going? Right? We have to have that purpose down. Begin new ministries. Cultivate evangelism. Celebrate victories. Start new groups and classes. Involve new people. And I can give you this if you want, or you can get the book, but I don't mind making copies of this. And so that becomes some of the strategy that we used at the particular time, And so if you're if you're in that particular stage, sometimes an external agent really, really helps, because they can take you down the road pretty fast. Then internal agent, right? You must live with the outcome. Did every change we make work? No. Right? So not every solution you pick is going to work. It's just how it happens. At least it happens in my family that way. Not everything in our marriage that we tried worked, How about this one? Understand social structure and history of the church. Sometimes what happens in change, and I'll just say that right here, we don't embrace the past. Like with those folks that have lived here for a long time in this place, we have to somehow embrace the past and thank them for what they've done up until that point. For instance, when I walked in here, even though the church is split and it had gone down to 60, can I tell you what I did? I walked around this sanctuary. This was already here. And I said, somebody dreamed something someday. Somebody dreamed something, and I found out who some of those remnant of people were who were still left, and I just shook their hand. I said, thank you very much, because they paid the price for this place so that we get to enjoy it now, through a very hard time. And you can win some people just by embracing the past. Let them tell the story. Let them tell the story about how this place came, to be. Possess existing networks and resource spaces, so that's what this could be for you. And I think if we get it down the road, that this network can expand, Mike McAvoy is another Recalibrate trainer. And Mike's church had some great growth this year from like 200 to 300. And he called me up. He said, Rick, can I bring a team of people up just to spend time with your folks? And we just had breakouts and stuff. And my dream is really that could be the deal. That strategically, you no longer have to drive 4 hours to get to this conference. That around the conference, we could have churches that would be key churches that people could go and visit and spend time with key leaders in that church. Doesn't that sound so good? Doesn't that sound so good? And I think it's really, really doable. I think it's doable. And so I'll say one more thing, and I think it's you, Darren, isn't it? This internal chain agent, you have to roll up your sleeves, and you have to get in the mess. You have to get in the mess. So I think I told you one day that I was bivocational for 6 years of ministry when I first started. I worked for a builder on Grand Island. His name's Mark. He comes to the church. At the previous church in Amherst, he made a commitment to Jesus. And I've worked for different builders before. There are some builders that sit in the pickup truck. When you're in the hole, pouring a footer on a rainy day. And there are other builders that get down the hole with you. And Mark was the type of builder that he got down the hole. He got down the hole and he got down in the muck and he was working with us. You know what else he was? When we were doing that stuff, some builders are afraid to teach you what they know. Not him. He would just be teaching all the time. He's a really good friend of mine. And I would do anything for him. And there will be people that come alongside of you that catch fire for what's in your heart. And they'll follow you anywhere. Because they know your heart. Amen? You good? Any questions about any of that stuff? We're good?
All righty. So I'm going to kind of close some things down here. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership and then give you guys your assignment and who your coach is and all that good stuff and go from there. The next particular slide deals with that's it. Deals with a idea called a force field analysis. It's been around for a long time, and I think it's really neat. And what it's neat about is trying to figure out how you overcome resistance in your organization. So, who's changing my slides? Okay. Thanks, man. So if we think about whatever change we want to happen, we envision that in a line as the status quo. You can think about what are the things that are for that change or against that change. So you might think about for the change might be millennials, potential millennials. For the change might be potential donors. For a change might be the administrators, whatever it happens to be. Over here you might think about power brokers, against, the community against. So you could think about who all these kind of constituency groups are. They could be individuals, they could be groups. And what we typically do is when we're going against a change, we look at which one of these things has the most power. And we're like, oh man, these guys have a lot of power. On a scale of 1 to 10, they're like an 8 if we had to guess. And we look at them and go, oh, I can't be successful. And we get really discouraged. Okay? What we don't realize is these other groups down here, and I'm just going to put little tags here. The way you make a change, we'd have 16 if I added those up, 12, 17, 19, 22. In this case, the change isn't going to happen because there's more power against it than for it. And everyone looks at this 8 and says, I can't change that, so it's not going to work. The reason we try and do this little exercise is to find these groups and figure out what their commitment is. Because the easiest way to make a change is to address the groups that don't care as much. Right? Take this guy down to a 2. Take these people down to a 0 and a 3. And I'm at 7. Well, I'm still lost. I can't do math. Let's act like I can do math. I'm trying to do this quickly. The point being, identify the groups and don't worry about these people. Eliminate these folks, turn them to this side, reduce their concern, and you can win against the system. The system being whatever that thing is that's blocking you. We focus too much on the big boulders. They're not going to move. The people and entities that are the most invested will not move. So this is a schematic of how you can figure out who all the people are, groups, individuals, and where you should be focusing your effort to get the greatest return. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's called a force field analysis. I could do it in greater depth, but we're running a little late. So let me talk to you just a little bit about some leadership skills that might be of help to you. What the research says, the best change leaders do are these 4 things. Change leaders communicate why they're going to do it. We already talked about that. Again, that reduces uncertainty, increases individuals' willingness to change, and most importantly, decreases people's resistance to change. They involve all the stakeholders. And here it's important to understand the difference between shareholders or people in your church, in your case, versus stakeholders. Stakeholders are all the people that are affected by your church. When you're going to make a change, it just can't be the people in your church. It's got to be the people in your community, the constituency groups you're trying to affect in the broader community. Does that make sense? And all too often, we only focus on the people who are right around us. These people coach. We've talked a lot about that. And I grew up, I'm the son of a football coach. I played all kinds of sports, and I ended up playing college baseball. I coached college baseball for a couple years. I still coach travel baseball. I got to take a drink, sorry. I don't like when people use the word coach, because I don't think everybody has the same definition of what it means. Some people think it means mentor, some people think it means train, some people think it means, in this particular context, it means taking an individualized approach to development. It's almost mentoring. What that means is I have to know, if you're one of my important constituents, I need to understand what your issues are and then work with you on individual plans to move you forward. Now imagine how much time that takes as a leader, right? But that's what they do. And finally, they encourage collaboration, which brings us to our next point about how we lead. In all organizations now, if we're talking about millennials or we're talking about interdependent, interconnected technologies that are bringing people together, we no longer lead top down. We share leadership. Sharing leadership is not delegation. It's not saying, hey, you do this for me. That's not shared leadership. It's sharing responsibility for outcomes. It's trusting individuals to live up to their potential and guiding them along the way, while at the same time understanding in the end you're probably the only one that is accountable. In shared, leaders emerge from your groups based on what their expertise might be, what the situation is, what their interests are. We're looking at, you're going to be recognized as a leader to the degree that you can contribute to the outcome, or that you have some set of characteristics or something, I don't know what to call it exactly, that's going to make people want to be around you, that charismatic. And it's about empowering people to do work, and that requires ownership. Empowerment is not, I'm going to let you do this. It's providing people ownership, responsibility, and accountability for the outcomes. Here's the hard part for people who are in normal top-down organizations, which churches are. That's challenging. That's not how we've been taught. And the way we measure success, that's not shared. That's on the one person here, right? So it takes a lot of faith in yourself, faith in your followers, and faith in the process. Groups with shared leadership have a shared purpose, so the vision stuff we talked about. Even if you're not a pastor, if you run a group or you run a unit within the church, you should have your own vision and your own mission that fit within inside there. And that way, when the people come on board and we're socializing them into what we do, they should hear those values. They should hear that language. And that makes it much more likely that we have shared purpose. If we give people opportunities to express themselves both in their talents and their opinions, and when they fall, we don't kick them, we help them, coach them through the process, we're also more likely to give them perceptions that they have social support in that community, right? That they can fall and somebody will be there to catch them. And ultimately, we talked about before, they have to have the opportunity to raise their hand and go, yeah, that's stupid, right? Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That doesn't feel good when people say that to you. Maybe they don't say it to you a lot, but I'm a professor. They say it to me all the time. Because, they're 22. They know everything. I can't say much. I got 3 teenagers at home. They know much more than the 22-year-olds do. But they have to have the opportunity to honestly be heard and be considered. You don't have to agree, but you have to show respect. You have to show decency, and you have to let them know they've been heard. When those 3 things exist, it's much more likely that people will perceive that leadership is shared, that the culture around that unit or that church has the opportunity for people to develop the trust to share leadership opportunities. What happens when you share is somebody not only does something that needs to be done in the church, they do something that they're passionate about, right? They do something in a way you wouldn't do it. And guess what comes from that? Innovation, creativity, new ideas, all the stuff that way back on slide 1 we said we needed to do. You can't do it alone. And not everything can be your passion, even if you'd like it to be. I love music. I'm not going to play the guitar anytime soon, right? Dan's much better at that than I am. I'm pretty positive. Yeah, probably. All right. So that's what happens when we share leadership opportunities. All right. So what have we covered? What I think we've covered. We've identified a number of forces. We've taught you how to identify forces that are driving change. We've talked about what those might be. We familiarized you. We haven't made you experts in. We've just given you an opportunity to look at some tools that you could use if you want to start working down this path towards changing your church, changing your organization, changing your work group, changing whatever unit you're running in the church. We talked about vision and mission and what they do in terms of signaling to potential individuals, not just to folks who are in your church, but to people who are surfing you on the internet, what they communicate to them about who you are and why that's important. And again, for those people who are running a worship group or those people who are running a children's ministry within the church, that's wicked important that when they go to your webpage that they know what you're about too. You're not about something different than church, but you have your own particular mission there, right? You have your own specific mission in that children's ministry. You want to tell them what you're about so they can determine, gee, I'd like that fits my identity, that fits my interest. We gained some tools to help overcome resistance to change. I showed you the force field analysis. I can do that in greater depth if you're interested in that. I'm more than happy to help you with that. And finally, we identified effective change leadership characteristics. Moving forward, I'm going to, are we having people? Let me tell you what happens from here. Moving forward, we'll do this. This is our plan. December, you have your coaching group meeting. In a second, I'm going to give you your homework assignment, which is here. You're not getting off easy, okay? This is the basis of your next coaching assignment. It's taking some of the tools we have here and just trying, by yourself or with your work group, trying to apply them to your context and see what happens. Evaluate your mission statement, right? See if it still fits. See if there's things you'd want to change. Look at why things are resistant to change. You're going to do a Zoom call, I think that's what they're using, to meet with either Rick, Dan, or Brian. I'm going to tell you who everyone's with in a second. They'll email you. If we don't have your email, or we don't have your email, please make sure I get it. They'll email you to set up the time for the call. Just call in. You guys will talk. You'll be able to talk. I've set the groups up based on the reason we asked you what you do in the church is we set the groups up based on trying to put those folks who have similar roles together. So if you're a pastor here, you're going to be with a pastor, okay? And you're going to be in one of Rick's groups. Rick has all the pastors. I will jump in on some of those if I don't want to say if I'm needed or warranted or somebody wants me to. What I can tell you is if you have specific questions, next time we're going to talk about systems. So you're going to see folks like, are they back there? Liz and Beth who are in the back, Dan who's in the back. I think Andy's here somewhere. They're going to talk to you guys about the systems and what we do, not only here, but what we should be doing. If you have a specific question, I know some of you came to the kind of the grand opening, whatever, I don't know what we call it, whatever we had, the first leadership training, and you wrote down some stuff that you were interested in that related to specific systems. Some of those folks will be reaching out to you about those specific ideas or questions within the next few weeks to try and set up a call with you to figure out what we can do to answer those questions. If when you leave here, you have questions of me, of Rick, or anyone else, you can certainly just drop us an email or give us a call, and we'll be happy to talk to you individually, talk to your team as a whole, talk to somebody in your church that you think you need help with. Whatever you need is what we're here to provide if we can be of any service. In January, we'll come back and we'll talk about systems leadership. That particular one will be a lot about how we take these visions and these strategies and then reinforce them in the policies and procedures of what we do on a daily basis, weekly basis here in the church. We'll talk about financial systems. We'll talk about worship systems, all those sort of things. Then you have another coaching group meeting. We're going to talk about team leadership. How do we lead people in teams, which is very different than leading individuals. And then servant leadership is what we will close with. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass these out. They're the same thing, and I'm going to tell you who you're with. Do you think I should call out everyone's names, or you just want to email them? I'll just email you who you're with, if that's okay, because I don't think anyone wants to sit here and listen to 45 names of me reading off who it is. I mean, I can, but you know what? If you'd like that, just wait till afterwards, and I'll read them to you individually. So at this point, we hit our mark. We have a few minutes for any questions you might have about this or anything broader or anything we could do for you. We also would be happy if you guys want to chat with each other. We're very grateful. Like I said, we started this a while ago, and we're hoping that, we might, if we figured it out, get 20 people. I think we had 67 signed up. We had 45, I think, show up. So that is, for us and for Pam, I think, a success. We're hoping we can continue this along the way. And, 6-8 months from now, you'll sit here and go, okay, I got a pretty good feeling of where I'm at. And we can then begin to identify very specific things for each individual leader that they might need to create smaller groups to go off on their different growth paths is kind of the idea.